Welcome to the Winged Wheel Podcast. Here to talk all things hockey are your hosts, Brad Crisco, Ryan Hanna, and Evan Lobsinger.
The turns have been tabled. We are recording during Evan's witching hour, the crack of dawn. You walked through my door with liquid breakfast in your hand. I was hardly clothed, trying to get my life and my dogs together. So this is your domain now.
I'm surprised you got out of the robe. I would have stayed right in it.
It was too warm, honestly.
You would have fallen asleep at the mic.
You missed another Brad and Ryan patented episode. We predicted the next Red Wings Stanley Cup win. We declared Hart Trophy winners. We said Seider for Norris next year. So
I'm sure everything next year won't be jinxed and cursed because of that episode.
Yeah, no, he's straight up lying. It was an hour and a half review of the Twisters trailer.
I also heard some rumors of that as well online when I briefly went on Twitter post-episode.
That's actually much closer to the truth than what I said, like by a lot. Happy Mother's Day, folks. If you have a mom or a mother figure in your life, call her. But we are going to get this one out of the way so we can go enjoy our Mother's Day festivities and whatnot. But lots of hockey to talk about, lots of Red Wings draft talk to talk about, and lots of morning Evan to deal with. Brad, this is a scary time for us. I really don't like when Evan's this much, like when he's vibrating this much. He also has a caffeinated protein drink, and so whatever is going to go on inside him is some
no free ads until they reach out to us.
That's right.
Well, whatever it is, I can see the umlaut over the U in whatever it's called. So this has got to be some of that extra strength European stuff.
Yeah, we'll ask Lucas what this is. Welcome to the Winged Wheel Podcast, folks. Barely together, but still here for you to talk all things Detroit Red Wings hockey, the world of the NHL, and more. I'm one of your hosts, Ryan Hanna.
I'm Brad Crisco.
And I'm Evan.
On this episode of the Winged Wheel Podcast, we are going to be discussing the age-old discussion of what do you do in the draft if you are in Steve Yzerman's position. Draft strategy is a big, big conversation, and we'd be remiss in not discussing it if we want to go further in terms of actual prospect talk. We'll give you updates on Red Wings in the World Championships and in their respective junior playoff series. We are going to be discussing a really notable draft prospect profile, one that has been linked to Detroit for years now, and then we'll be giving you NHL updates, playoff updates, and more before overtime. Before all that, I want to let you know that this podcast is proudly supported by our Patreon supporters, patreon.com/wingedwheelpodcast. If you want to support the show, Patreon makes up pretty much primarily almost all of our support. So it really does keep the motor running, keep the heart beating on the show. Our patrons get access to some really great benefits, like access to our bonus overtime episodes, which record and post right after these main ones. They're a great time, a lot of fun. We let loose and talk about hockey and not hockey. You also get access to our Patreon exclusive Discord. Additionally, you're automatically entered into all of our giveaways. For example, this past season, we gave away 2 tickets to every Red Wings home game, the vast majority going directly to our Patreon supporters. So again, patreon.com/wingedwheelpodcast. Best player available. Does that even mean anything anymore? Because we've been saying it for years. That's the de facto answer when people say, what should we do in this upcoming draft? Should we take a right-handed defenseman? Should we take a left shot forward? Whatever it might be. And I mean, the most sensible answer is best player available. But does that even mean anything? What is the draft strategy? Let's start there. What's the draft strategy if you're Steve Yzerman this year?
What do I want it to be, or what do I think it will be? Because I think those are going to end up being 2 very different answers.
Well, I'm selfish, so give me both.
Well, I think we have a pretty clear picture to this point of what Yzerman's draft strategy is and what archetype of player he likes. We've used the term an Yzerman type so much to the point where it's basically a parody of it by the time we talk about it at this point, where he loves his high compete, 200-foot, well-rounded players at forward and defense, to the point where that's almost the entire friggin' Red Wings roster right now. But because of that, it's left a glaring hole in some key spots, especially when they need offense. And I'm not opposed to the 200-foot player. That you need a lot of those, not just some, a lot of those to win in the playoffs. You look at all the teams that are left. These teams are not devoid of that type of player. But what these teams have as well is high skill players, which is where the Red Wings are severely lacking in comparison. So I think Yzerman's draft strategy this year is going to be more of the same. I think he knows the type he likes. I think we know, and I think he's going to keep looking for that, especially in the first round. We'll dive deeper into his later round picks eventually here, but I think when I say high skill, people envision one type of player in their head. Give me that small forward who has like 140 points and maybe they pan out, maybe they don't. And that's not what I mean by that. If you have a guy who's not in the mold of a Zach Benson or a Patrick Kane, but still can put up huge numbers, that qualifies as to what I would like the Red Wings to do, especially with their first pick in this draft. Whoever's available on the board that has the most potential. I don't care if there's more risk that comes with it. You know, you could look at a Cole Eiserman, the very one-dimensional player that we're going to talk about, and everybody knows his strengths and everybody knows his flaws, but everybody knows if he hits big. And that's the prototypical high-skill player you're thinking of. But I'm not opposed to someone like a Michael Brandstad-Nygaard who really fits the Yzerman mold, but put up a lot of offense in the Allsvenskan this year, especially in the playoffs. So you can have it either way, just no more safe picks. That's all I'm asking is swing for someone who could be a legit top 6 scoring threat. Or if the best player there is a Carter Yakimchuk falls to the Red Wings pick at 15. Yeah, he's a gamble because he's not the most refined defenseman, but the potential and the skill is out of this world. Swing for it. Zane Parekh, swing for it. I don't care about position. I care about who's going to help this team put goals on the board for the next 10 years.
Spoken like a true forward.
The Red Wings seem...
Screw you, I said Yakimchuk and Parekh.
That was a good service to the two defensemen at the table.
At 8:30 in the morning, I'm saying neither of those names, by the way. Those are off the table.
Parekh?
I'm not saying that. No, not yet.
All right, go for it.
The marbles are still there. I think what the Red Wings are elite at in the first round is identifying the guys who are elite guys.
They get all-time dudes for sure.
And they aren't afraid to have their own draft rankings. How many drafts have we gone into where we're like, consensus says these are the top 20 or the top 10 or the top 5, and the Red Wings are like, we're at 7, we're taking this guy who's ranked 18th, or we're going to take Moritz Seider and shock the world. They're not afraid to do that. I would be shocked if Steve Yzerman has ever looked at any of those, and they just build their own. So I'm in agreement with Brad here. I think the Red Wings really do need to go after a guy whose potential outweighs his current skill, and they got to take, quote unquote, the best player available who could potentially turn into a superstar.
So I can definitely see instances where this matches up 100%. I'm not saying that this hasn't happened. You pass up on guys like Benson or Savoy, for example, and I know those are the two most probably easy names to pluck out in recent memory. And I'm not saying that you're saying that was right or wrong to do, but those are just the examples. Yeah, that fits the mold of what you're talking about. But last draft, they took Axel Sandin-Pellikka, and he wasn't a de facto Yzerman type. They took Lucas Raymond 4th overall. He wasn't a de facto Yzerman type.
Well,
and Nate Danielson is producing, and that was, in my mind, a risk. And he had the potential. It was just harder to see. Like, there was more risk on whether he'd realize the offensive potential so far. So I understand what you're saying, but I think it's much more in the middle than maybe. I think he's much more in the middle.
In the first round, I agree fully.
Okay.
I think he's done very well. He's done very well in the first round. Again, has he made every exact pick that I would have made? No, but it's close enough that I'm not saying it's egregious. But it's just so much of the same type that you see the trend. And I would even argue Lucas Raymond is and always has been his type. Take out the fact that he's 5'11" or whatever he is. 2-way, 200-foot forward, battles his ass off. That's an Yzerman type. 100% Lucas Raymond's an Yzerman type.
Well then, but that matches up, right? That's a crossover between high potential, can bring you the offense and the I think
that's a 4th overall pick.
Yeah, and that's why I spent.
Why don't we just keep doing that?
The NHL has this thing called the draft lottery.
Oh, all of a sudden I shuddered.
See, there's a reason I spent a whole ass year banging the table for Lucas Raymond in that draft. It's because he was that rare unicorn that fits both, we'll call it, ideologies of how to draft. And I think Yzerman's done well in the first round, getting the guys that he could relative to where they were available. But the problem is where they have been picking has not led to these, quote unquote, superstar level offensive producers. So I don't even know if any of the picks he made, there even was one available.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I think if you go back and look, and I know you already said you agree on first round, but if you go back and look at the first round picks in Yzerman's tenure here, they've been really good. And anyone's where they're not, it's because the jury is out. It's too early to tell.
No, 100%. And we talked last episode a little bit briefly about the unique circumstances that look like are going to unfold in this draft where, even though they're picking 15, there could be guys with higher skill ceilings, higher potential available at 15 than there was at number 8 and 9 in the last 2 drafts where they took Danielson and Kasper, just because of how defense heavy this draft is, how defense needy the teams ahead of them are. There are going to be players that slip. And where I'm going to be disappointed is if someone...
That's a man who hit 8 yellow lights on the way
here.
Look in
the camera. Look in the camera.
And it's going to happen. But if they're sitting there at 15 and let's say, I'll pick 2 forwards at random, Cole Eiserman and Beckett Keefe fall. And you have a really good defenseman. Notice how I'm saying really good, not disparaging the guy, but someone like Adam Jiricek. If they sit there and they take Jiricek and leave all those goals on the board, that's going to be the disappointment to me because we know what Adam Jiricek is. And he's really good, but he's more of the same of what they already have. Do they have anybody like Cole Eiserman? DeBrincat, kinda.
Yeah, DeBrincat's just growing up Cole Eiserman. Well, not exactly, but yeah.
Eiserman, I would hope, is going to be scoring more than DeBrincat at this point, but same type of player. But that's the only one, not only on the roster, in the whole system. They need that. Whereas you can pluck not to the same skill level, but about 5 Adam Jiriceks out of their system right now.
So you're answering the what should they do question. I think this is a really good conversation. I'm going to do a little detour here because Evan said something that I think is really valuable to repeat, which is that teams have their own draft lists. And that sounds like a silly thing to state, but genuinely, there are hundreds of players that are potentially able to be drafted. Teams' draft lists are very short. They fit on a small portion of one page. You can scroll and miss it on your document that you have open on the draft floor. They scout their guys. They know who they want. There's probably a guy on consensus rankings that's super high that's missing from a ton of teams' lists because they ruled him out early on. And they might circle back from time to time to make sure they're sure if in public consensus he's like, oh, this guy can't drop past 6. He's so good. He's a guaranteed thing. But by and large, they have their lists. And you are going to be disappointed if you expect your interpretation of public consensus models to be what the Red Wings or the Bruins or the Panthers or the Sharks or anyone like that to follow, especially as you get out of the first round. Once you get past the first half of the first round, it is so wide open. A silly game that I play, I'll admit that I do this, is you look at guys who were taken in the second round, Stankoven or whoever else, and you're like, oh, the Red Wings had the opportunity to pick him, or, Jason Robertson went 1 pick after Lindstrom, who Detroit took. I wish they would have just taken him instead. The most likely scenario there is that he wasn't even on their boards. And I'm not saying that's an excuse to absolve all draft teams of missing really key guys in their class. I'm just saying that's how the NHL draft operates. It's a function of not having the ability to scout everywhere at all times to the nth degree. The scouting teams are smaller than you think. So that's worth pointing out. Brad, you were getting to there essentially saying the strategy shouldn't be necessarily best player available. This is an interpretation. Tell me if I'm wrong. Maybe not best player available. You're talking best player within the range of what Detroit really needs right now, which is high-end offensive talent. And if there is a defensive player who is so good, breaks the mold, he should not have fallen that far, then you break that strategy. But by and large, tiebreaker, and even maybe more than a tiebreaker, goes to the forward. Is that where you're sitting?
If it's close, it goes to I'm not even going to say forward, point producer. Again, if Parekh or a Yakimchuk Falls. I don't care where the goals are coming from. Elite offensive defensemen can set up goals. I would, in the case of an elite forward or an elite offensive defenseman, lean towards forward here because, again, they have Axel Sandin Pellikka coming up through the system at least. So there's an option there. Whereas at forward, again, as we've mentioned, the cupboard is thin right now for point producers, goal scorers, whatever you want to classify it as. So, yeah, if there's a defenseman who absolutely should not have fallen that far, by all means, you get your value. You make the pick, but if it's close, like I don't see how you don't take the forward right now with how the system's constructed.
It might be because I chugged half of Evan's drink while he wasn't looking, but I think I'm a lot more optimistic this morning. I don't feel the anticipated, the Red Wings are just going to take another big defenseman who can move reasonably well and move the puck reasonably well, but isn't, a high end. They might go that direction, but if there's a high end offensive forward on the board or a high end offensive player or someone with a really high ceiling, as you're describing, Brad, I think history dictates in Yzerman's tenure here that they're going to go that way. Like I especially because like Yzerman knows what the scoring future of this team is. Like they did well this year, but they're going to have to do a lot to make sure that comes from their foundations, their system in the future.
It's very well possible, but if you look at Yzerman's tenure, they've only picked 3 forwards in the first round.
Well, they had no defense though before.
No, I know, but it's hard to get a track record on that one because Lucas Raymond, yes, but again, he was kind of a mold breaker and he was 4th overall. And in the last 2 drafts where the Red Wings, I would argue, also had a very obvious need at forward, they took the 2 forwards that fit Yzerman's mold to a T with both of them in Kasper and Danielson. And in terms of offensive production, to this point, it looks like Kasper's probably not going to be a big point producer in the NHL. Danielson looks like he has a chance, so we'll call that a 50% success rate. Not that Kasper's going to bust. He's going to be a very valuable forward in the system from the looks of it, but I don't think he's the guy you're throwing out on a power play 5 minutes left in the game with the season on the line, right? Danielson might get to that point, but it took him getting to a much stronger WHL team to be that guy, and obviously his preseason and training camp last year gives a lot of optimism as well. Because I still have this feeling, and to me, it's not even in my mind like, oh, they're definitely going to take a defenseman. If they're sitting there at 15 and they're tossing the idea around between a Cole Eiserman and, was it Cole Beaudoin?
Mm-hmm.
I still get the feeling they're going to take the 200-foot responsible guy with a lower offensive upceiling versus the one-dimensional, albeit huge scorer.
I think I really need to see what happens this draft because with all of what you guys have just said, kind of feels like the Red Wings have sort of built the foundation. Like, okay, we've got this high floor potential team going forward. Now in our next few drafts in the first round, we can really take swings at the Cole Eisermans who may have an unrefined game, but if he hits, he's a 40 goal scorer every single season. So what happens this draft will really dictate to me how the Red Wings have viewed previous drafts.
I fully agree. Because I think there's just been, and you even said this just now, Brad, like it's been they've grabbed from so many different areas and there's been not enough to build a consensus. Yeah, this is absolutely what they're going to do every time. It's also a function of, what opportunity was there to fill in the high-end offensive guys before. There were high-end offensive players behind where the Red Wings took. Like in terms of potential, you look at, Benson Savoy, Frank Nazar is one that we talked about a lot on this show. But also, you're right, Evan. They were building a foundation. Detroit needed everything.
You can't have everybody fizzle out. You need to take some safe picks to really build out what could be, a pretty middle of the pack NHL team at some point. So if the Red Wings do take swings this draft on high potential prospects, then I will understand the picture a lot more.
Remains to be seen, but it's going to be an interesting one. 15 you're not guaranteed to find the next Dylan Larkin at 15, but you're right. It's going to inform a lot on the way this team thinks, especially because this roster could turn over in a massive way this year, which is hysterical.
Yeah, and this is only talking about pick 15. We can go back in Yzerman's tenure and look at
second round picks.
2, 3, 4. You're not expected to get NHLers with those picks, but the odds dictate you're going to get a few decent ones. They haven't. They have, with relative to how many second and third round picks they've had, they have not done well. And I don't think it's an archetype issue there, because they've picked players all over the map. For every Brady Cleveland, they've taken a Dmitry Buchelnikov, and for every Amadeus Lombardi, they've taken, an Andrew Gibson. Like,
that's where the draft for me as a Red Wings fan really is a head scratcher, because they take everyone of every type.
Since Yzerman got here, Albert Johansson looks like he could be a player, albeit probably a bottom 3 defenseman, but a regular. Carter Mazur might be their best non-first round pick. And you're looking at a guy who could be a legit middle 6 scoring winger, which for the third round, tremendous value. Trey Augustine.
That's a good one.
Could be a dude. That's 3 maybes and nothing else really coming through that's got me super excited to say, yeah, this is going to be a guy. Wallinder, maybe.
Brady Cleveland will challenge for the Norris eventually.
Yeah. There's and again, second, third, fourth, fifth round picks are long shots by nature. But man, the amount of picks they had, there is almost, well, to this point, there's literally nothing to show for it in the NHL. And I know it's only been 5 years, but still. And if we're talking guys who will actually make an impact to the point that you can't replace it in free agency for $2 million, that list might end at Carter Mazur.
You say 5 years like it's a short amount of time, but I think historically, after draft plus 3 years, if you haven't made the NHL or aren't on the cusp, that's pretty much the kiss of death. So you can almost say half of those guys are we already know what they're going to be, and it's not an everyday NHLer.
This is going to be an interesting draft. All right, let's give an update on the Red Wings system. We haven't talked a lot about the Toledo Walleye. The Toledo Walleye have won 22 straight games. They haven't lost in forever, and they have swept the first 2 rounds of their playoffs. They are going to the Western Conference Finals. So that's the ECHL team, Detroit's affiliate in the ECHL, so a step below the AHL and the Grand Rapids Griffins. So, we haven't done them.
We have to get there. Their games look insane.
It's got to fly, fish, fly. Like, it's got to be. We're going to go, but keep going, Walleye. You deserve the airtime. Elsewhere, Nate Danielson and the Portland Winterhawks are down 2-0 to the Moose Jaw Warriors. Danielson's best efforts haven't resulted in Portland winning a game yet in the WHL finals, but hoping that one extends so we can get more Nate Danielson hockey to watch. But that is going to be a notable one to watch, because if Portland loses, then that's the end of Danielson's WHL and CHL season, because Portland won't be going to the Memorial Cup if they lose. And then could be available for the Griffins.
Yeah, I want one of 2 scenarios happen. I want Portland to come back, win the series, go to the Memorial Cup, so we see Nate Danielson in the Memorial Cup, or I want them to lose the next 2 games so he can get to Grand Rapids immediately.
Yeah. Everyone's watching the World Championships. I think we all saw the clip of Lucas Raymond ripping one home on Alex Lyon, which was funny to watch. Nice to see Lucas Raymond. He got the A. And, in the company of Victor Hedman and Eric Carlson, who's captaining that team, 22 years old, that's a pretty big accolade.
Yeah, hopefully he's doing some recruiting while he's over there as well.
I hope all the Red Wings are doing some recruiting while they're over there.
I hope Alex Lyon is taking Trevor Zegras golfing a lot.
Well, Alex Lyon, he cut his hand, so hoping he's okay and that's nothing, serious.
It's hard to hold a beer. It's hard to double fist with only one hand.
Yeah, that's right.
My God, that's Trey Augustine's music.
Okay, let's jump into a quick break here. We'll be back with you on the other side to talk one of those draft prospects that we mentioned before. But first, we want to let you know that this episode of the Winged Wheel podcast is proudly brought to you by Labatt Blue Light. Created in 1983, this premium light Canadian Pilsner is a delicately balanced beer brewed with Cascade hops and a blend of malt. It's fresh, crisp, and brewed to the highest quality standards. There's a little bit of Canadian kindness in every sip of Labatt Blue Light. How did it get in there? They're Canadian. That's how. You can spread the love yourself by sharing a Labatt. And when you do share a Labatt, you're not just sharing a beer. You're sharing an experience that'll pair with anything from hockey to a hoedown. So next time you're watching a hockey with your buds, be sure to share a Labatt, because while you might not all root for the same team, although we on this podcast do hope you're rooting for the Red Wings, you can all enjoy a Labatt Blue Light. We honestly love going to games in Detroit and seeing Labatt being the beer that fans clamor for all over the arena. It's a reliable beer and great to have in your hand when celebrating a goal. So head to the link in the description of this episode or the one you see on your screen to find Labatt in stores near you today. You must be 21 or older, and as always, enjoy responsibly. Welcome back. Steve Yzerman. Cole Eiserman. I'm just saying, if Calgary gets an Iginla, Detroit gets an Yzerman. It only fits. Cole Eiserman is this year's player who used to be at the top of a lot of people's lists in terms of who's going to go, after first overall in this draft. And he seems to have fallen in the past year, but doesn't mean he's not still a top prospect. And in some people's eyes, Cole Eiserman has fallen right to Detroit's range. Bit of a polarizing player and a bit of a polarized player in terms of where his talents and his efforts lie. High-end offensive player who scores goals. His talent in goal scoring is maybe unmatched in terms of his peers, but some folks have questions about, compete or where he should actually go in the draft. So who is Cole Eiserman? Not spelt the same as Steve Yzerman, but, pronounced largely the same. But who is Cole Eiserman? How has he developed, and what would he bring to the Red Wings?
Well, he's an interesting case study because going into this season, like you mentioned, it was a 2-horse race for first overall between him and Celebrini in a lot of people's eyes. And we've seen that before where guys will come in near the top of the list and have a disappointing season and plummet down the draft rankings. We've seen that time and time again. And Yzerman, being no different, came into this season and broke the USNTDP goal scoring record and plummeted down the rankings. This is the part of scouting that confuses me. He did nothing different this year. Everybody knew what he was going into this year, and he was a top 3 prospect at worst. He did exactly what he's been doing his whole life, to the point where he broke Cole Caufield's goal record and fell 10 to 15 spots in most of the rankings. Listen, I understand his limitations. He's an inconsistent offense-only scorer. But unlike Cole Caufield, he's 6 feet tall. Shoots left, not right. But the similarities between the two are extensive. Like the 1T from the spot, the elite shot, the good but not great compete, good but not great playmaking. Yzerman does play physical when games get chippy. Like, he's not the type of guy to shy away from it. He's not going to Austin Matthews this stuff. He's not going out of his way to look for it. That's not his game. He's the guy who finds soft spots on the ice, gets the puck, shoots it 1 billion miles an hour with pinpoint accuracy, and it goes in the net. Imagine what we hoped Alex DeBrincat would be this year, to the 100th percentile. That's what Yzerman did this year. He was lethal every time he touched the puck. And yeah, there were games he didn't touch the puck a lot, and that is the criticism, where he hasn't rounded out his game to the point where everybody would want a player to, but that's never been his game. And yeah, is it in theory possible that he can develop a few extra traits? Sure. Do I think he will? No, players usually don't at this point. Do I still take him at 15th overall if he's available? Without even thinking twice. Like, this is a potential generational goal scorer. Not generational, but like franchise goal scorer. 40 goals a year, every year, is not off the table for this guy. Likely? Probably not. Otherwise, he wouldn't be falling to 15. But possible. Like, it's weird to me how far he fell doing exactly what he's done his whole life.
I think there's a few things. I think everyone around him has improved their overall game significantly. And so the guy who's more one-dimensional starts to fall off the boards. And I think the other thing, maybe there's an over scouting of the USNTDP at this point.
Yeah,
I look at guys like Ryan Leonard, for example. Everyone's like, oh, is it because of his line mates that he puts up all these goals? And he fell dramatically. So I'm not sure what the bias or the reasoning is. That's where I kind of landed at. But man, Cole Eiserman, yeah, he could score goals like nobody's business. If he's there at 15, the Red Wings don't take him, I'm going to be very concerned. Do the Red Wings believe that they can build the rest of his game up so that he can be a serviceable NHLer at the other facets of the game? So if the Red Wings hope he'll turn into more than a offensive zone juggernaut, I think they're kidding themselves. But man, if he can hit on the goal scoring front at the NHL level, that is going to be a real gamer and a huge boon for the Red Wings.
I want to talk about one point you made there about could the Red Wings develop the rest of his game. First point for me is if his goal scoring is as good as we think it is, you don't need to.
Well, you know how the Red Wings are with who they've drafted. They're going to try their best.
1,000%. I agree with you. But that also leads to my second point. Look at the culture and the type of team they have built. If you're going to draft a million Marco Kaspers and Nate Danielsons, and you're going to sign a ton of Andrew Kopps and JT Compher's and these 200-foot, hardworking, can-do-it-all forwards, it's so you can absorb these severely one-dimensional, albeit elite trait players into that lineup without sacrificing it. Could you throw Zach Benson, Matt Savoy, and Cole Eiserman on the ice together? No, absolutely not. They would get caved. Sure, they might score 3 goals, but they'll probably give up 6. Could you throw out Marco Kasper, Cole Eiserman, and Nate Danielson together in 5 years? Absolutely you could.
Sounds like a sick line.
Yeah. And so if you're going to do all this drafting based around this is the type of team we're building, okay, great. I agree. This is what the foundation of a team should look like, but it can't be just that. You build that so that when a Cole Eiserman potentially falls in your lap, you don't have to worry, is he going to win any Selkies? Nope, we'll never get a vote in his career. But the guy who's centering him might. Okay, but there we go. No worries.
Last time I checked, one of the greatest, or if not the greatest goal scorer of all time, has never won a Selkie either, and that's Alex Ovechkin. So, yeah, I'm fully on board. If Cole Eiserman's there, they have to take him because you can't pass on guys who could be 40-plus goal scorers.
And the point we should make, because we're talking about this all in the context of pick 15. If we're looking at Cole Eiserman's goal-scoring ability and compared it to the rest of the draft, even the players that are going to be going in the top 5, Cole Eiserman would rank number 1.
Yes.
His goal-scoring ability, like Cole Caulfield in his draft, is the best in class. It's not like you're reaching for the best goal scorer that just happens to be available at 15. You would be picking the best goal scorer in the draft.
Other than Connor Bedard, he might be the best scorer in the last 2 drafts. This is also at 8:58 in the morning, so my memory recall is severely lacking.
Get him.
But this is the type of level we're talking about. This guy is elite in terms of prospects goal scoring. I do have many concerns about the rest of Cole Eiserman's game.
Oh, yes.
I'm not a big fan of his first few steps to, get up to speed. And I'm not a big fan of his overall speed, which at the NHL level, especially in this day and age NHL, if you are not at least above average, you are very much going to struggle. Mind you, if they put him on a line with a couple burners and 200-foot guys, I think they can really hide that. And skating is definitely one of the things players work on all the time, so it's not a huge issue I'm seeing. But if he doesn't develop that, it's going to be very difficult for him to be a tenured NHL player.
I want to jump back like a minute when you referenced the greatest goal scorer of all time. And I thought for the first time in like 8 years on this podcast, we'd have an organic Jonathan Cheechoo reference, but evidently not. I'll have to wait another day. You talk about the concerns, and I think you've both done a really great job talking about how dangerous this guy can be shooting from up close, from distance, picking his spot. I'm not leaning into the flaws because I think he's not a great pick. spoiler, I'm on board with Evan and Brad. I really love this guy, and he'd be a wild card in the best way kind of pick to take. But just in the interest of exploring more in depth the parts of his game that have pushed him down the list is, Brad references inconsistency. What drove us most nuts about Alex DeBrincat this year was his inconsistency, but I will say some of the question of his inconsistency is effort. Like, if that's coming up from scouts at this point in your development, it's not a great sign. It's not a death note or anything like that. It doesn't mean you're absolutely a bust or, put him on your don't draft list, but you don't want that label too strong too early on. I think Evan did a really great job pointing out that the USNTDP is a really high-end system where the players all develop really well around him. And so a guy who tries to do too much or, might try to force himself into traffic or find space that isn't there so he can pick his shot rather than use his teammates, he is naturally going to fall down the order compared to USNTDP players who are all like that. The national team program is just A1 gold star. It's hard to rival that kind of team of players at his level. Meanwhile, if he played on some random junior team in the OHL or the WHL where he'd be by far the best player, he'd get away with that a lot more. The competition would probably be a bit weaker too. So you have to use a little bit of perspective there. For me, I fully agree that, he overdoes the thing that makes him best. Like he tries too much in terms of shooting, and that sometimes gets him into trouble. It sometimes makes him a bit variable in terms of defending against, which is why probably he seems a bit inconsistent. I think that's coachable. I think you can coach that out, and I think that is too much of a diamond with the rough right around it to ignore, because if you're able to pick your shot from that far back, like, you say, what if you put him on a line of two burners? Then you have him as a trailer. Then you have him, he's able to find the space, and the moment the puck's on his stick, he can then beat a goalie. So the questions around him, I think, are fair. I think it's normal for him to be pushed down the draft order at least a little bit. I don't think it's completely analogous to, small guys who got pushed down the order just because they were small guys like Caulfield and DeBrincat. I think there's some real questions about his game. But in the end, I think this is a highly talented shooter who, if he's at 15, I think that's a lot of other teams ahead of Detroit who would have made a mistake, and I'd want to see Detroit pick him.
I think if he gets to 12, 13, 14, again, it would all depend how the draft board falls, because if you're sitting there with Seneke, Catton, and Yzerman there, that probably negates his point. But if Seneke and Catton are gone in the top 10 and you're looking at Yzerman and that, pick 12 comes up, I think that's the point you got to pick up the phone. See if you can get up. Eat a third-round pick or whatever it's going to cost you to jump 2-3 spots and get him.
You know what's funny is people think that trades don't happen in the NHL because no one asks in the draft. There's actually a ton of phone calls. I can tell you that for a fact. There's a ton of phone calls to move up 1, 2, 3, sometimes 20 picks. No one ever pulls the trigger.
If you actually look historically, nobody ever pulls the trigger in the top 10.
That's what I mean. Yeah, everyone is
I know a team that acquired the 15th overall pick not that long ago.
This one's in Vegas. It's at the Sphere. Everyone's going to be in a different vibe.
That's right.
I'm just hoping for some chaos.
Everybody's a little too lubricated. Minnesota's on the clock. Steve Yzerman phones. Bill Guerin's got his head down on the desk. Just picks up the phone and hangs it up. And just picks it up, hangs it up. I am not dealing with that today.
Let Evan manage the event. Will it be a catastrophe? Yes. Is it the last live in-person NHL draft anyways? Yeah. Just let him do it. It'll be fun.
I'm not sure it could be worse than how the NHL handles a lot of their events and all that sort of extracurricular. So I say we let it happen.
What do you mean Cole Eiserman just got drafted to live?
Hell yeah, brother. Let's go.
Hey, we'll take the live money, man. I'm not sorry. I should be, but I am not better than that. You look at what those live golf guys are making. They're like, oh, it's for the betterment of the game. My man, you made $500 million just now.
Yeah, don't get me started.
I'll push Brad down the stairs for $5. It's a low price.
It's actually one of our Patreon tiers.
Yeah, that's right. $5. You sign up with the $5 tier, and if you're ever around, you get to push Brad down the stairs.
Every comment's just, it's not about the money.
That's right. Although the last time they did that, they actually fixed one of your shoulders. So
yeah, and then I blew the other one out shortly after. So I don't know, maybe we need to do it again.
In the interest of revenue. Okay, we're off track. Cole Eiserman, interesting pick, not just because of the name, but again, If Calgary gets an Iginla, Detroit gets an Yzerman. It's only fair.
If Calgary takes Yzerman, Red Wings have to take Iginla, right? Just out of spite.
I don't care if Demidov's still on the board. You take Iginla out of spite. For legal reasons, that is a joke.
I'm just going to throw it out there. If the Flames take Yzerman and the Red Wings get Iginla and then they trade them for each other, I'll buy a Calgary Iginla jersey.
Well, that would
just because it'd be funny as hell.
That would be funny. All right, let's move on to the rest of the NHL. Did Sheldon Keefe record that video from heaven?
He must have felt like he was in heaven to be out of Toronto.
Like he looked like he was in paradise. And we talk about this a lot, but the moment you are not working for the Leafs, like the highest pressure situation you can possibly be in hockey, maybe short of being a French-speaking player or coach in Montreal, you have to feel like the wrinkles disappear from your face. People around you tell you they love you again. Like
the Northern Lights we all saw Friday night was actually just Sheldon Keefe's aura.
It was his emotions releasing.
Yeah.
That was actually, you know what? They say when you leave a role, you're not going to be remembered for what you did. They'll remember how you left. And that was a very, very, very classy way for him to leave. Not just no ill word about anyone, which maybe he would have been justified, but he thanked and celebrated everyone that he worked with. That he'll find a job as soon as he wants one.
Oh, 100%. And I'll bet he'll do well in whatever market he goes to next because it won't be Toronto.
Yeah, I was saying I don't think that he was the solution for Toronto. I do think they should have moved on from him last year, which leads me into my next point is Brendan Shanahan seemingly has survived this. And, from all accounts, also for those of you who want to know what Evan's overtime scoop was from a while back, stay tuned for this overtime and we'll give you the details of it. But it does seem like Brendan Shanahan is going to survive this one this year. I've heard that they're maybe going to just take the year and let his contract run out. Presumptively, there's 1 year left. And then after that, are they going to just let the position expire and not backfill it? Maybe. But to me, it's like if you made the decision to extend Sheldon Keefe and then you had to fire him before his extension even came in, and there's a brand new GM, so it's not his fault, and Sheldon Keefe's fired, so you can't blame it on him anymore. I understand why Brendan Shanahan's not going, but also he's the one responsible for this. And I want to qualify this by saying Brendan Shanahan's my favorite player of all time. My favorite player of all time.
But is he your favorite executive of all time?
Not even close. He went to the Leafs. He broke my heart. But that one to me was like, it just feels like a little bit more of the same from Toronto.
You could only make one change at a time, apparently. And this is a team with playoff failure, 8 years in a row now in the Austin Matthews era? 7 or 8 years? What functionally has changed in that time other than coaches?
What's functionally going to change is when they trade Mitch Marner to Utah.
Are they going to trade him, though?
So. Yeah, the way they were talking, I
agree they're thinking about it, and they probably should. I think they probably have an unrealistic expectation of what they're going to get for an $11 million player with 1 year left on his contract. My prediction right now is they're going to shop him pretty heavily. They're not going to like the prices out there, and they may come to the possible correct realization that we're better off keeping the quote-unquote asset. But Shanahan being back, you have the new coach. You're going to have most of the same roster. Like, dramatic changes are needed, not tweaking. And yeah, trading one of the core four would be dramatic. But again, I'm still skeptical it's actually going to happen. I think intentions are great. And I think their intention, like you mentioned, is probably true.
Yeah, to move Marner, yeah.
To move Marner. I just don't think that market's going to... Even the teams that could really, really use a Mitch Marner right now, how many of them can do enough cap gymnastics to fit $11 million? Because Toronto's not going to want to retain on that because one of the biggest asset they're going to get out of trading Mitch Marner is $11 million in cap space. To go get another defenseman, to go get another winger, to go get whatever holes they need to plug, a goalie perhaps.
And they need him to wave to wherever he's going to go.
Exactly, which is going to limit the market even further because we talk about Detroit being one of the very few teams that A, can make the cap space, B, has a direct need for his type of player, and C, has the assets to give up for it. That means nothing if he goes, nah, Detroit ain't it. Not doing that. And then boom, one of the biggest suitors could be off the market.
And his agent will be wise to that. And they'll, if this is a divorce, it's not going to be a clean one. The image of Marner right now, he is the current whipping boy, justified or not. It's moved off of Nylander and it's over to Marner. And there's all this talk of the security firm that he pays for. And I don't know it's hard in Toronto to know what's real and what's noise, but the public image of him isn't great. And if he's on the outs, based on how, negotiations with the team have gone, the public discourse about his dad and the way that his agent handles things, I just can't anticipate that one being a clean divorce. And so with all that said, if they're going to try to dump Marner, he'll have no incentive to make it easy.
They'll never win on that trade. The Leafs have to go in knowing we'll never win on this trade. It's to get rid of the noise, to get rid of the distractions, and hope to God whatever we can get back can be an impact at a position of need.
And that's accepting, because if they're in the unfortunate position where they have an elite offensive player who they know they don't want to extend at the price that he wants anywhere close to it. So you're right, they've already lost the trade and it's sunk cost.
It's only going to get more difficult with Mitch Marner, because once they go to do contract negotiations, I think the chasm between what the team will give him and what he wants is vast.
I think it's going to be north of $15 million total in contract value.
And I bet you the team doesn't even start in double digits.
No, they're going to, I think they'd give him 10. They wouldn't, because they can't do core 4 still, but they would think he's worth 10.
I think everybody involved with any Mitch Marner negotiations from both sides will understand he's probably not taking a pay cut.
Yeah.
The question will be, is he getting a raise or not?
I don't even think let's say Toronto wanted to proceed with the core 4 model, I don't think they'd want to pay him 10.9 again.
Well, Tavares will be the pay cut.
Yes.
Yeah, because Tavares is up after this year. Marner's up after this year. But remember the DeBrincat situation last year with Ottawa. Detroit was directly involved with that. It's the same situation, but more restrictive because of a bigger cap hit and a no-move clause. DeBrincat didn't have the no-move. Ottawa could have traded him as a pure rental if a team was willing to pony up. Toronto does not have that option because Marner could just say no. So I think you're right. I think this is going to get, maybe not publicly, but it's going to get messy.
And we're all better for it.
I mean, as a Red Wings fan, are you crying even a little about the misery of the Toronto Maple Leafs?
I might funny. If we don't get him.
No, you know what, though? Watching all this play out is I'm not going to say, it's better for Detroit to not get a potential 100-point winger. That is actually exactly what you would add to this team right now, short of a 100-point center. But
also, let's not forget, he has been nominated for a Selke before. And that's not a joke. People are going to go look that up.
Yeah. Let's say Detroit acquires Marner. There's going to be people saying, you just, talked about character and all this drama and that drama. Yeah, that's stuff you worry about if you're making the playoffs. Let's get there first before we start to needle in on that.
If we trade Mitch Marner and extend him, and we make the playoffs every year of that extension, fantastic. What a brave new world.
He could run Evan over with his car, and I'd be like, well, you know what?
Well,
why was Evan?
I got bad news about his car.
Why was Evan? When did you know about that bad news, Evan? I have some detectives who are wanting to know a little bit more about that. Oh, geez. You know what? When a joke gets hijacked like that,
are you making a pun now?
Yes, that one was.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're never sure with you because you make so many accidentally.
And you know what? This is too early in the morning for me to be thinking that far ahead. Okay, anyhow, let's talk about the rest of the playoffs. The second round is already astronomically better than the first round, right?
Oh, it's sick.
The most disappointing series so far is the series where I thought, if you're not going to look at Dallas, Colorado, this is probably stacked with the two teams who are probably closest in contention in terms of cup viability. New York, Carolina. Carolina last night was able to get their one win. New York up 3-1 now, and to me, that series could be 3-1 the other direction very easily. I do think New York's been the better team, and in terms of actually, capital G getting it done, they've done what they've needed to do, but another disappointing show so far for Carolina unless they pull off the impossible here.
It's the same story every damn year. And I'm not even going to say just with Carolina, the playoffs. Do you know what there's been all this talk about 5-on-5 play and special teams and yada, yada, yada. You want to know the difference in this series? Goaltending.
Yeah. Has
Carolina's goaltending been awful? No. But it hasn't matched Shesterkin. That's the difference. Yep. That is the difference. When you get in a tight series like this, the better goaltender wins.
Okay, but, how close were the games that they lost? They didn't score a power play goal until game 4. If that was different, I actually think this would be at least a 2-2 series.
Follow-up question. What's the biggest reason they haven't scored a power play goal?
Oh, you're saying because Freddie Anderson didn't score?
Shesterkin.
Yeah, no, I see what your point. New York's a great team, and I think a lot of people weren't expecting them to be this good. So frustrating because he is this year's, I just wish you would have bought low while his value is low, but his potential is still high. But Alexis Lafreniere seems to be emerging as...
Well, we can do Capo Caco then, because that guy's a ghost.
I haven't seen him in a calendar year. But Lafreniere is like unbelievable in terms of how he's turned his game around. Bringing in Laviolette has done wonders for Lafreniere. We have friends over in the New York sphere. They say Gerard Gallant's a hockey terrorist. And the thing is, Evan's got a good point. It's Lafreniere and Kako. What were the chances that both those players were a bust to that degree? It just wasn't adding up.
Didn't make sense.
And there's still you don't think this way now if you're a Rangers fan, but did you take anything off of Lafreniere's ceiling? Because if he's able to do this now, if you were kind of able to foster this play in his initial years, by God, he could be playing a real first overall pick to the talent that we thought he had. Anyhow, he's been a difference maker of late for New York.
Oh, it's phenomenal to see. I always hate when guys get written off too early, even if it's not a Red Wing. It's just come on, man, the guy's 22.
Yeah.
There is room for growth here.
There's high-end first-round picks where you're yeah, you can see the bust potential and you were a risk when you were drafted. And then with Lafreniere, I'm it's just not adding up. There has to be more there. The series that we all love, because it's the scene from The Simpsons where they're all standing around the two monkeys fighting with knives, is Florida and Boston.
What a perfect.
But actually knives.
Actually knives. This is the ultimate rat bowl, the team that throws rats versus the team that employs a rat. It was Tkachuk and Pastrnak fighting at center ice, which, amazing, right? I don't care what you think of any of those guys personally. That is metal. That is Showtime NHL hockey right there.
This series has rocked in every way.
Yeah, I rocked the helmet off of Pasternak's head.
I thought Tkachuk turned him to dust on that one punch.
He threw 3 punches after he was down. And then at first I'm oh, Tkachuk threw 3 punches after he was down. Then I was what do I care? That's not my problem.
Yeah, he played for the Bruins.
That's Boston's
Every
problem.
time these types of series comes up, it feels like they never live up to the hype. But this one is exceeding expectations.
Especially because, I think the way it went was really good. Florida I think they were a bit rusty the first game. Boston had the energy after winning the Toronto series, and they took it to Florida. We talked about it. That was a surprise. And then Florida did what was predictable. They came in and they ran Boston's show the next game. And then they won again in big fashion in game 3. I do think Florida's the much better team here. I was talking to some Leafs fans over the weekend, and they were do you really think Florida's that much better? I'm unfortunately, yes. They wanted Boston to win so they can say the Leafs lost to, a much better team, whatever. But I do think Florida's that much better, but I also think Boston knows how to win in the playoffs enough, and they are, and I mean this in the nicest ways, ratty enough to make a difference and maybe steal some games. I actually can see this series tightening up a little bit. I don't know if I'd bet on it, but I think Boston has it in them, and I hope it does because it's just pure entertainment.
I hope for more blowouts, because more blowouts means one team just starts running around, and that means more fights.
Just take turns with the blowouts.
Channeling my inner Evan here. I love violence.
The students are becoming the master in this series. It feels like the crown is being passed to the next group of rats.
All right, let's go to Vancouver, Edmonton. That first game, going into the series, everyone was is this the year Edmonton actually does it? And then Vancouver comes back down 4-1. They win 5-4. And we all saw Connor McDavid's empty stare, his emptier than normal stare. And we were like, oh, does this mean Edmonton's toast or that Vancouver's the real deal? Edmonton did get the job done and win an OT after tying the game in the third. So it's a 1-1 series, and Edmonton got the split going back home. So really, Edmonton has the upper hand here. But in terms of the narrative, this one's tight. I actually don't know who I'd pick at this point.
Well, much like the Rangers-Hurricane series, what it's shaping up to be in this one is going to be goaltending, but different. Because it's bad.
We have two best
so bad.
goalies in net.
Well, it's not. Vancouver has their third goalie in net. They're doing their best, you know?
I understand. It's still bad. It is still really, really bad. And when you have, I don't know what to even refer to McDavid when he gets pissed off, a planet killer coming in on a third string goalie, it's hard to love Vancouver's chances. But that being said, McDavid had 4 points last game, and it still required overtime, despite outshooting Vancouver 30 to something in the teens.
This has been the Edmonton Oilers' motto since they brought or drafted Connor McDavid. McDavid gets 4 points, and they lose 5-4.
Okay, all that about the goalie, all that about McDavid, blah, blah, blah. He had 0 shots on goal in game 1. 0. For credit to Vancouver, that was not for a lack of trying. And I don't know if McDavid's playing hurt. In the playoffs, everyone's hurt. So unless you're seriously hurt, I don't care. 0 shots on goal. I understand McDavid just decides which years he wants to score 50 and which years he wants 100 assists. I'm sure one year he'll decide to do both. But Connor McDavid, you are the best player on the planet. Not adjusting for era, you're the best player to ever put skates on. And that's not adjusting for era. I know. Stop about Gretzky. I know. I'm not saying. You have to get more than 0 shots on goal. You're the difference maker in a tight series like this. And when you have an opportunity against a goalie who's not, Igor Shesterkin on the other side, you have to be the difference maker, especially if Draisaitl's playing banged up, which it seems like he's playing really banged up here.
Pop quiz. Who are the 2 leading scorers in the playoffs?
Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl.
Wow. Great guess, Evan.
Am I right?
Dude,
you are correct, and it's not close.
I can't remember if I said this on air or off air, but I saw this chart of how, it's from Dom Lucian's article on What's Wrong with the Leafs, which is a great annual read. It was like...
How many books is that? Is it like Game of Thrones?
Well, no, because he actually writes them on like Game of Thrones.
Enough.
But the Leafs' best players, they seem to disappear in big games. Like their offensive production sometimes gets halved. Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl, if you factor in how they perform in the regular season versus the playoffs, they actually elevate their game in the playoffs.
Connor McDavid has scored 2 goals in 7 games in these playoffs. He's averaging 2.4 points per game.
There's a stat. In 7 games, McDavid and Draisaitl have a combined 33 points. The entire Toronto Maple Leafs playoff roster combined for 33 points in 7 games.
Oh, my God. That's my favorite stat of the year.
If Connor McDavid went to the Toronto Maple Leafs, if like that one lottery ball changed and he went to the Maple Leafs, the current salary cap would be $125 million, and you can't convince me otherwise.
I'm in full agreement with that.
My favorite part about this is, once again, the playoffs have come, and Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl are turning into almost literal gods. And I still put their odds of winning this series at a coin flip.
Yeah, I mean, if
they can't get a save.
If Nurse Cece keeps getting exposed like that, and Skinner has it in him to win games. I think Skinner is a good enough goalie to win the cup. We saw what Colorado did, but Colorado was a much more complete team.
He can. He ain't, but he can. He's got to do it eventually.
He has to do it. We'll see. The series that's been, speaking of Colorado, 2-1 Dallas, but it doesn't feel like Dallas has a stranglehold by any means. Colorado, after being down 3-0 and coming back and winning, and then Colorado coming back from being down 4-0 and almost tying that game in game 2. So Dallas walks away from their home games with a split. Colorado then loses their first game at home, so Dallas is up 2-1. Dallas played a much better game in game 3, so they kind of frustrated Colorado a bit. It ended up being a couple empty net goals, but it was a 1-goal game up until the end. But that series is like, as we talked about last episode, it's almost unfair that series is happening now and not in the conference finals.
So I've got a weird reference to describe how the first 3 games of this series has felt. You've seen Jurassic Park, yes?
Yes.
Remember the scene?
I knew you'd get back to Jurassic Park eventually.
Yes. You remember that scene where they're driving away in the Jeep? It's Ellie, Malcolm, and I forget the trainer's name, and the T-Rex is chasing them, and it's like, must go faster, and they're all screaming.
Yeah.
And then eventually they get away. They're Dallas, the T-Rex is Colorado.
It does feel like this.
That's exactly how this series feels right now.
It almost makes me feel foolish for picking Dallas as the Cup winner because they would have had to have gone through Colorado. And I picked against Colorado too early because I am an idiot. But they're showing you why, like, if you're a team that has a Cup pedigree, like, you don't lose that easily at all. That's the playoffs. Second round has been incredibly entertaining. I hope every series goes to 7 because it's been better than the start so far. Okay, we have other NHL news, but why don't we save that for next episode? Let's get it. Oh, no. We're doing the Utah names. Ryan Smith put out the Qualtrics survey for the possible names to vote on for the Utah blanks, because for the first season, they are going to play with just Utah on their jerseys while they build the brand and the name and stuff. And I understand it's a tight turnaround. You want to get the brand right. But he put out a survey for people to vote on.
So they want to get the brand right. So they're going to let the general public decide.
The public never messes it up.
Yep.
Anyhow, these are the names that Utah have put out to vote on. You can select up to 4 in the survey. The Utah Caribou, Ice, Hive, Mammoth, Black Diamonds, Blast, Venom, Mountaineers, Outlaws, Canyons, Glaciers, Frost, Powder.
Oh my God.
Yeah, the Powder.
They're not on any NHL players' no trade list. Oh God.
I have several jokes to follow this up with that I will save for overtime.
Swarm, thank you. Swarm, HC, standing for Hockey Club, Fury, Squall, Yeti, Freeze, and Blizzard.
That list.
There's a lot of bullets that they need to dodge there.
That list, capital S, sucks. Even the ones I like are like, eh.
I actually think there's enough in my hot take is that team names all suck when you try to pick the best one. We like the ones we like because they already exist. Like anyhow, I do like the Yeti. I do like Mammoth. I'm kind of partial to Mountaineers. And either Caribou or Canyons I also like.
Canyons.
Yes.
I was with you, though. Canyons?
I don't know. It's
Canyons.
The jerseys could be cool.
They're just big cracks.
Like, what is the jersey?
I don't know, man.
Just a bunch of tourists staring at a hole?
So when they go on a losing streak, are they in a deep depression?
It's just 2 off-center mountains.
Okay.
Yeah, on either side. They're like...
Depending where they put that logo on the jersey.
The general public has never messed it up, guys.
Anyways, all that. My vote goes to Caribou.
I like Caribou.
I wasn't booing. I was saying Caribou.
I think the logo could be cool because, you know that Stags concept that kind of went viral?
Yeah.
I really liked the aesthetic of that jersey and the logo,
too.
Except Stags is an objectively god-awful name. Same concept, but with Caribou, I'm in. I like Mammoth and Yetis because I think the logos could be sick. Everything else can go to hell. Outlaws, fine. You can always do something cool with that. Pretty generic, whatever. The rest sucks, except for Powder.
There are definitely some obvious bad names in that list. But I think for me, what it comes down to is what branding do they put around the name? If they pick a name and the branding is bad, the name doesn't matter because what you associate it with is the logo, the brand. So they have to nail that. So that's maybe why they're letting the general public decide the final few names.
In overtime, we're going to figure out what noise a caribou makes because I'm pretty sure it's kind of like shocking.
And that could be their goal horn.
My God.
Maybe. Well, let's hear the sound first.
Ryan, I know what it is. I know what I'm suggesting.
We're going to jump into overtime here on this episode of the Winged Wheel podcast because we are firmly off the rails. Overtime is brought to you by our Patreon supporters, patreon.com/Winged Wheel podcast. If you want to join the Dub Club, you get access to the bonus overtime episodes, the Discord, and the giveaways, and you allow us to produce this show in the off season, whether that's a good or bad thing, that's for you to decide. You allow us to support the Jamie Daniels Foundation. Additionally, you allow us to produce shows like Expected by Whom, brought to you by Prashanth Iyer and Sean Shapiro. Give them a listen and give them a follow. So again, patreon.com/Winged Wheel podcast. Let's take some questions from our patrons. The Dandy Man Can says, watching the Hurricanes, I've been impressed with Chatfield. He's mobile, intense, and seems to have good defensive instincts. What do you think of someone like him as a cheap option to hold down the ice behind Edvinsson? Plus, he'd be another brick in our all-Michigander lineup.
Like him, and if you like him, and I like him, and we all see what he is, so are 31 other teams. He will not be as cheap as you would hope.
Yeah, right shot defenseman, 27 years old right now. He'll be 28 in a few days. He is going to be trying to cash out as much as he can. I like him to hold down the right side behind Seider. Is he a true second pair right deep? Ideally not. But if
he's going to get paid like one.
I don't hate the idea, but the price has to be right and you don't want to get too crazy. David Ragland says, could the Wings consider packaging some combination of the number 15 pick, Mazur or Casper, and Berggren for a top 3 or top 6 forward? If so, who might be a match and would it be a good idea?
I don't think you're very far off of Mitch Marner trade there.
Yeah, people will look down on that. They'll be like, oh, that's too many smaller pieces. No, those are a lot of high value pieces.
And also $11 million of cap space, no move clause, all the stipulations. He's not going to be cheap, but he's not going to cost you like 4 first-round assets.
Moritz Seider says, if Kosa comes in and dominates in camp, do you think Yzerman would consider keeping him up?
Nope.
Well, it depends on what your goalie situation is, though. If they go sign someone, like if they have 3 NHL goalies again, then no. Remember what we said on previous episodes? It's tough for goalies. It's very tough for goalies to come in. I could see him earning games at a camp, for sure. But full season, he could force their hand. I completely agree he could force their hand, but I don't know. He has a higher hill to climb than everyone else.
Put it this way. If we're going into training camp with Ville Husso and Alex Lyon next year, is anybody going to be happy, including Steve Yzerman?
Happy? No.
Exactly. So I think he's going to try and make a move for a goalie this summer, which will limit Kosa's opportunity.
It'll be hard. Bill Bull Hours, the eternal winner, says, I hear a lot about the pick your opponent proposal for making the playoff matchups more intriguing, but I think I have an even more interesting idea. The team with home ice advantages chooses the home/away arrangement for the series. Do you give yourselves games 1 to 4 at home, knowing that if you drop any of them, you have to finish the series on the road? Do you take games 4 to 7 so that you can have all clinching games at home, even though you might put yourself in an early hole? Imagine the team determining the schedule has to do so before the series starts, then start sweating when things start to go against their team. Way more fun than just choosing your opponent.
I love the idea, and I love where your head's at. No way that would be feasible with the schedulers.
Can you imagine someone has home ice against Toronto, and then it's like, Carolina, and I'm not disparaging Carolina's market, but Toronto games will make a lot more money for the NHL than Carolina games. And if Carolina picks 4 games at home first and they win that series in 5 and the NHL only gets 1 game of Toronto gate, or let's say they sweep them, Gary Bettman will have an aneurysm.
Yeah, we'll just kick out the Taylor Swift concert that night and host it at the ACC.
What realistically would probably end up happening here would be the home team, if they're they would be the favorite since they're home team. They'd probably pick the first 3 or 4 at home because they want the gate revenue.
Yeah. That's what unfortunately, that's what the owner will say is like, I want guaranteed as much gate as possible.
If we sweep them or if we play 7, we're getting 4 games at home. It doesn't matter.
You're talking, depending on the market, $2 million a night. I don't know. That number is even antiquated in my brain. I can't remember the last time I updated that, so it could be more. Okay. Avery Sloppy Second saying Bauer will be making the PWHL jerseys while NHL players will be wearing Fanatics Advantage PWHL. The PWHL is doing a lot of fun stuff.
Yeah, they are. They're nailing it. And they're setting a foundation properly so that when they have 12, 15, 20 teams, all the foundations are in place and it'll be a great product. Meanwhile, God, I can't wait to see what these Fanatics jerseys look like. The content will be amazing. The aesthetic will not.
I will say, though, the Nike being the ultimate culprit behind the whole MLB scandal was not a twist that no one expected, but it was kind of like, oh, for the first time, Fanatics saying it's not our fault. They were actually right.
I thought Fanatics was making them and they were just being branded as Nike.
No, but Nike dictated exactly how to make them. Yeah, it was. Yeah, it didn't need to be that way. And everyone was like, I can't believe you made me feel bad for Fanatics. Shame on you, Nike. Okay, we're going to wrap up this episode of the Winged Wheel Podcast. Thank you all so very much for tuning in. We're going to be back with you midweek for another episode. Really, really appreciate, all of our Patreon supporters making the show happen. Thank you to Labatt Blue Light for sponsoring the show. Additionally, thank you to all of our new listeners. Welcome to the show. It gets a little bit silly in the off season, but we have fun. And to all of our listeners of old, thank you for tuning in. Support us on Patreon if you're willing to support the show. It really doesn't make a big difference. Patreon.com/wingedwheelpodcast. If Patreon's not for you, what you can do to support us is leave a rating wherever you get your show. YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Give the thumbs up, subscribe, tell a friend. Makes a big difference. And to all of our name level supporters on Patreon, we could not do it without you. Arjun Shankar, Yves Bartels on behalf of the Sarah Garon Foundation, Aikfer, Samuel Soderholm, Icon, Victor Zetterberg, Ryan, Brad. I'm swallowing Hannah. Oh, I did say that last episode, didn't I? Yeah, that's my bad. Glenn Brabham, Cronner's Left Knee, Ashley Van Conant, Sea Lion, Keenan O'Donohue, Yanni Burgers, Meals on Wheels, Matthew M. Rice, Admiral Matt S. of the Cheesebag Navy, Avery Sloppy Seconds, Beep, Carl Brutanen Nanaluski, Carl Provy, Citizen High Five, Clip Clop Nene, Connor Scovey, Craig Kibble, Denny's Gamer Girl, Derek Enstam, Cider, Dickens, formerly Marlon Winchester, DJ Denton, God Creatives, Give Blood Fight Probert, Goose Looney's Drinking Club, brand new name level supporter, great name. Hockeytown Matt, Hassam Al-Qassem, Jay Gollum, Jacob Turner, Jeff Pridemore, Joel Miranda, Jonathan Miller, Kalen Wood, Marcus, Matt Keeler, Matt McKay, Michael Edlund, R.A., Ryan, 50, Hannah Cap Hannah, Scott Martin, Skeletor, Scree and Lube, That's What I Appreciate About You, Stoley, 70, Wingnut, Utah Storm and Mormons, Wallman's Elite Dancing D, Yzerman Stan, General Andy Bohan of the Cheesebag Army, Sam Bankson, AB, Adam Rose, Axel, Sandy Pelika, Bellingham Acid Balls, Brad Simmons, Chi-Town Wings fan, Chuck Buff Chest, the Tarpless Goon, Commander Ben Barron of the Cheesebag Space Force, Connor Layton, Corey Prida, Darren Fick, Datsuk's Dirty Deke, Eric Nance, Evans Fourth Putt, Frank Stanley, Gene Sullivan, Griffey Boy, James Pridemore, Jeremiah Dobo, JM Rhapsody, Joey Jojo Shabadoo, John Evans Derogatory, John Ingalls, Josh Yelton, Kevin McCracken, Known Petrie Truther the Mexinadian, Quaz, Les Grossman's Ungodly Firestorm, Linda Hull, Michigan Boy Navs Country, Norris Seider, Ophelia, Red Wing Tar Heel, Reed, Salt Lake Sugar Girly, Sean Mason, Steven, the Hodag, the Hat 123. This episode is sponsored by Twisters, Tom Eiserplan, Respecter, Throw, the Road Puss, and your second favorite patron, as well as Wings fan in St. Louis, Scott. Thank you all so very much. We'll talk to you midweek.
Thanks for tuning in to the Winged Wheel Podcast. Be sure to check out wingedwheelpodcast.com, where you can subscribe to the show on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. You'll also find links to other ways to support the show, such as Patreon, official podcast apparel, and more. And don't forget to follow the show on Twitter at Winged Wheel Pod. And of course, the hosts at Brad Crisco, at Ryan Hanna WWP, and at Hockeytown Evan.